All right. Well, welcome to the DFL Before DNF podcast. I know I say this a lot. I think I say this every time, but I'm just really excited about the person in front of me today. And the reason I say that all the time is because I just genuinely love talking to people and I love to get to know people better. But it's really cool when the person you get to talk to has such a vivid place in your story, in my story, just of who I am as a person and who I am as a person being so shaped by running, if not what feels like lately entirely shaped by running. Today I get to talk with Chris McDougall. He wrote Born to Run, obviously. He wrote Running with Sherman, Natural Born Heroes, Born to Run 2, magazine writer. I remember where I was when I was reading the book, and I can only say that about a handful of books. I know where I was when I was reading My Name is Asher Lev. I know where I was sitting when I read Catcher in the Rye, Shackleton's Incredible Voyage, Empire of the Summer Moon, and Born to Run. And so it's such a special moment for me to get to have Chris McDougall here. So first, Chris, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Oh, dude, now I am totally intrigued. Tell me about Asher Lev. Where
Have
were
you heard?
you? What's going on? Oh, yeah, yeah.
You
It was like required reading back when I was in oh man, another era uh,
oh
for high school. So
good. So
tell me
I
about that.
was I didn't hate school, but I didn't like school. I was very into art, and um, my freshman and sophomore year, my combined GPA was 1.7. And then I got a little bit
Generous.
of, yeah, then I got a little bit of a motivation to get going. And a lot of that was because of my high school art teacher. I'm from Lubbock, Texas. In Lubbock, his name was Mr. McLean. And he pushed My Name is Asher Lev across the table to me as a senior. I had broke up with my girlfriend recently. I was struggling with motivation. I was trying to figure out who I was. And I think all the books that I just listed, those were moments of me trying to figure out who I was. And man, when I read My Name is Asher Lev, it just felt like I wanted to love something as much as Asher loved art. I wanted to be as good as something as he was at art, but that wasn't really as important as just wanting to love it so much. He forsook his family. I didn't need that. I wasn't dying to do that, but just that he loved it so much and he was so good at it. And I believe in the book. I haven't read it since then, but I think, does he interact with like Picasso in it or something like that? It was just this magical book and magical character. I just loved it.
Isn't that cool? By the way, for some weird reason, I don't know how it happened, but I caught a cold, like the worst cold I've had in like
Oh no.
5 year pre-COVID. And
Oh man.
my physical contact is so limited that I'm like doing one of those like detective like yarn maps on my wall trying to figure out who the hell did I catch this cold from? Like who was I actually physically in contact with in the past 5 days? So if you see me grabbing these fellas or popping stuff in my mouth, I'm not just like idly snacking on candy. I'm actually trying to like keep the juices flowing so I can actually talk.
Yeah, trying to sort it out.
But
Well,
to your point,
that's no
to your
good.
point though, I'm just a lot of times I'll talk to people and
Uh-huh.
they'll say, "Hey, I really want to write something, but I don't know. I don't think I should." I met a big wave surfer here named Corey Gray,
Uh-huh.
uh, a woman from New Jersey who's a realtor who moved to the North Shore of Oahu to pursue like her dream slash nightmare of becoming a big wave surfer.
Yeah, that feels like a nightmare.
And I was like, you know what? That's the story that needs to be told. She's like, I know, but I'm not the one. I said, you're the only one.
Yeah,
And
right.
if I forgot who wrote My Name is Asher Lev.
Chaim
Um,
Potok.
I thought it was Chaim Potok. I was going to guess. I should have just guessed
Yeah.
it. I should have taken the risk of looking smart rather than the fear of looking stupid. But if Chaim Potok had not written that book, imagine how your life would have been changed. I guarantee, no matter how accomplished he was, at the time he wrote it, he wasn't 100% positive
Mm.
anybody was going to read it.
Wow.
And I guarantee you, he did not think that it was going to fall into the hands of an art teacher in Lubbock, Texas.
Oh
That was
man,
not how he foresaw that
what
book,
a,
evolving.
what a good observation. And I think about like JD Salinger too. So I've really did a deep dive into JD Salinger. So I read the book when I was 17. I was holding Caulfield's age. Like it was perfect timing. But then as an adult, like, and I look at like just his level of greatness. And then he was this recluse who wanted to get away. Like the price of greatness also is something I wasn't willing to pay. I think this is one thing that's interesting about you and what you've done as an author. Like JD Salinger was this really reclusive figure. You're generous and in the open, like all of your interviews, you're a generous person with what you've learned and what you've known, and you're willing to give time to people like me. Sometimes the price of greatness is too much also. So I see that in Asher Lev. The price of greatness for him was to forsake his family. And for JD Salinger, it was the same thing. As the author, he really forsook his family, and not as an intentional decision. I think it's just who he was as a person, that recluse. But I think a lot the books that capture me the most are always surrounding this idea of the price that we have to pay to be great.
So I wrestle with that a lot, because one of the things that really, I don't want to say bothers me, but I can't think of another word, so I'll go with bothers me. The focus on competition, and greatness and toughness, and you gotta. So like one of the things that really bugs me is the reverence that a lot of people have for guys like David Goggins, who I feel is like a Salinger person. Like I feel like Salinger didn't become reclusive because of the acclaim for The Catcher in the Rye. Salinger already was kind of a weird dude,
Yeah, right.
Did you ever read about his meetings with like Ernest Hemingway during World War II?
No.
Oh, check it out. So like Hemingway was like peacocking around Europe, because at that point he was like the famous World War I writer. So during World War II, he was like on assignment for Life magazine, and he could get wherever he wanted. So like generals are turning over their personal jeeps to Ernest Hemingway, and he's like going to the front lines to inspect the troops. But Salinger was like serving, like he was actually
good.
in uniform.
Yes, I've seen those photos of him, just like sitting on a rock on the, mid, deployment.
Right. And so those two guys had an encounter, and I can't remember actually who, it must have been Salinger. I can't remember who actually transcribed it later, but I think it was Salinger talking about his meeting with Hemingway. And Hemingway was like the blinding force of the sun, and Salinger was kind of like cringing in his presence. That's the difference between those two guys. Hemingway fed on attention. Salinger shrunk from it. And so when I talk about David Goggins, I think whatever personality and mentality he had coming into his fame was already there. And so this whole like, be hard, be tough, be tough. I think it just sent such a horrible message. I feel like that's what's so wrong, not just with sports and exercise, but with the world, this message like, we gotta be tough, we gotta be hard, unforgiving, don't finish until you're in the hospital. Like, fuck that. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I think, looking at your characters and thinking about, another book that I didn't mention that I think was a good, like a segue moment too, for your character of Caballo Blanco. I'm a diehard fan of Cormac McCarthy, like these authors that before I didn't know he was releasing these two other books or however he released. And I was at a bookstore and I saw it there, and it's, when you see his name, I just grab the book and I'm going to buy it. And your name is similar to me in that you just grab the book and buy it, out of a joy for it. But one of the things I loved about your characters, the way that you developed them, there was a Cormac McCarthy type vibe to it. And this appeal to the myth of the cowboy and Caballo, who he was. And it sounds like from everything I've read and listened to you on that, you weren't trying to, or were you trying to appeal to the myth of the cowboy, or were you just accurately representing who he was?
That's one of the most gratifying things about having some rear view mirror perspective on these books now a few years later is that I've now been around these people, with the exception of Caballo, who passed away in 2010.
Right.
2010? Is that right? No. Hang on. No, it's more like, okay, anyway, 2012.
Okay.
But so I see Barefoot Ted a lot. I see
really?
Luis Escobar, Scott. Oh, yeah. I just got a text from him like the other day. He's planning some wacky boat tour in Turkey in June and wants me to come. And I'm like, Ted, dude, I like you, but not enough to go on a fucking boat with you, you know? I, float down some river in Turkey with you? No, no, no. Not under penalty of death. But so what's been cool about that is being able to look back and think, you know what, I got it right. At the time I wrote Born to Run, I was still principally and primarily a journalist,
Hmm.
a factual reporting journalist, not a book writer.
Yeah.
And there is a difference in those two things, which I was still trying to navigate. Um, I came out of a hard news tradition. I was an Associated Press correspondent. Then went into
Hmm.
magazine journalism. Was doing stuff for the New York Times Magazine.
Yep.
Scrupulously fact checked. Every statement has to be attributed. And so when I wrote Born to Run, one of the things I wrestled with was like, now how do you translate into a much bigger canvas?
Yeah, I bet.
You're trying to tell a rollicking story. And so I really wrote it from the perspective of a news reporter trying to get every detail factually
Hmm.
correct. And one of the things I did was,
Hmm.
I pre-reported, I'd actually written 2 magazine articles about the Tarahumara, even about Caballo a little bit for Runner's World and Men's
Yeah.
Health. Then we had the race. And then I went back and I went to everybody's homes. So I traveled to Virginia to see Jen and Billy. I was in
Really?
Seattle. That's where Scott Jorg was living at the time.
Yeah.
I went down to Arizona to meet up again with Micah, who was spending some time in Arizona away from the Copper Canyon,
Hmm.
and hung out with everybody. And Barefoot Ted, for instance, I went to Burbank, where at the time he was living at his cousin's compound, where his cousin would restore these carousel horses, and Ted and his wife and daughter were living in like a little cabana on this compound. And Ted and I hung out for a few days, just hung out talking, going for
Wow.
runs, doing stuff. So um, I wrote the book, and then looking back, I feel like, yeah, I was on the money. Like, and people have come up to me and they said, I didn't believe it until I met him. I didn't believe it until I actually met Jen Shelton or Billy.
Yeah.
And Billy Barnett, for instance. Billy was living here in Hawaii until very recently. So
Oh, really?
I remained really close with him and his wife and new babies.
I got to think with the success of the book that the characters in it had to be pretty grateful for you accurately representing them and not creating some myth around who they were, like Scott Jurek being who Scott Jurek is. What I learned from the book, like you talked about, like almost this like sort of like primal person at the starting line who is yelling and all this sort of stuff, but at the same time, he was willing to tag along to the Tarahumara area, knowing nobody, just because he's also like at his core a competitor. I got to imagine they were grateful that you kind of nailed it the way that you did, because then when people interact with him, it's not like they don't have to play a character. It's just like, it's just who they are.
Um, I guess I don't know. I don't know. Nobody asked for me to pop into their lives, tell
Yeah,
their
right.
stories, and I imagine well, here's what was surprising was I figured if anybody was going to have a beef, it was going to be Ted and Caballo.
Yeah.
And so the only 2 advanced copies in manuscript form that I sent out were to those 2 guys,
Wow.
and I got 2 responses. Ted was exultant. He's like,
Oh.
"This is the PhD dissertation that I no longer have to write." And then Caballo was pissed, you know, out, outraged, furious. And
Really?
but yeah, yeah. Over time, he softened and relaxed and enjoyed
Huh.
it. But you know, but think about it. Like, this guy was going his own way, doing his own thing. He
Yeah.
wasn't working for anybody else. He wasn't
Right.
committed to anybody else. He was the ultimate renegade cowboy, And I
Right.
used a line when I wrote that obituary for Outside Magazine. I said something like, he was the ultimate cowboy. He made up his own name. He went his own way, and he was his own horse. Like, he took off on his own 2 feet.
What a great observation. Like in modern times, like, Billy the Kid, Bat Masters, any of those old names that were more like nicknames or monikers that, yeah, who's done it? Caballo Blanco. I don't know anyone else who's done it in my lifetime. That's an interesting observation.
I mean, Micah True is not even his name. Like, he made up the
Right.
name Micah
His
True.
name isn't even his name.
Yeah. He went by Caballo Blanco. So this guy was the ultimate
Yeah.
um, independent rebel, and then all of a sudden I'm going to come in and take responsibility for his story. You know
Yeah.
how outrageous. So
Well,
um,
I love that perspective because it means that you're saying I can't take credit for a story because all you were a journalist in that regard.
right.
You're telling the truth to the world, and it's so what we like about Micah True is what is true about Micah, not Chris McDougall's myth of this person.
And then in fact, if he wasn't pissed off, then I would have had it wrong. You know,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So,
that's
but
good. So you,
again we were cool. We remained close until his death.
yeah,
Actually, at the time, my family and I were living in a little farm in a place called Peach Mountain, Pennsylvania, and
okay,
I had reached out to Mike. I said, "Dude, you should come up here. Come up here during your summers. You know, it's too hot in the canyons, and we got 5 acres, man. You just build a little house for yourself, and you can work with the Amish farmers. They would love you, dude. And they would
wow,
pay you cash money, load your pockets with cash during the summer, get back down to canyons in the winter." And we were going back and forth about that for a couple of years before he disappeared and
hmm,
passed away.
hmm. Well, you talked about giving that early manuscript. I think about like the book releasing in '09, right? And it's still hard for me to wrap my mind around. And I got to imagine these other massive books that have gripped a market or a culture. I don't even know how to word it. Have slow starts. Why do you think there was a slower start in terms of sales? And was there a moment? Was there one particular thing, or was it a grassroots movement that caused it to grow?
I'm mystified. I have no idea. I
Really?
honestly don't. I honestly don't know what the hell happened because looking back now, it was on the bestseller list for 4 years. It
Wow.
was in Amazon's top 100 books for over 2 years. That's
Wow.
insane. And
Yeah.
I I wish I knew what the chemistry was. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
And all I can guess is that because I've tried to recreate it since then. Like no other book I've
Sure.
written since then has had the same like bombshell impact that did. And
Yeah.
but it wasn't right away. I had to go out there and I was like hucking out of the back of my car at 5Ks and running clubs and
Uh huh. Wow.
begging people for an opportunity to speak. And then it started gathering momentum. I was on the daily. So even for like publicity, I've almost
Yeah.
never been on television. I've never been on national NPR, like All Things Considered, terrorism. Never any of
To
those
this
programs.
day.
To this day, to this day,
Huh.
I was on TV once for 5 minutes. That's it. I was on the Daily Show with Jon Stewart, which you can tell how long ago that was.
Wow.
Um, but to this day, what's funny is that Born to Run to this day sells the same number of copies per week that it has for like the past 6 or 7 years. It's the sales
Wow.
level has been absolutely like level, cruising along week in, week out. So
Hmm.
all I can guess is that I think that story hit just the way Holden Caulfield as a bewildered teenager struck a nerve with you as a bewildered teenager.
Yeah.
Born to Run, I think, speaks to people who are in that moment of doubt in their
Mm.
running journeys. And
Yes.
they look at me as like, I'm like, I don't know, maybe I can, maybe I can't. I'm not really sure. And we're surrounded
Mm.
by this whole, Ocean's 11 of entertaining characters.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, like, I think if I were to encapsulate the gift that you gave to runners, it's this stat that you name late in the book that if you peak at age 27, you're back to the age of your potential fitness of the age of 18. You return back to that at 65. One of the reasons I think, just armchair evaluation here from whoever I am, is that book made me think. And so now I'm 41 and I continue to still feel stronger. Like I'm running still faster and better. Like prior to this book, I think we all felt like we were done at 27. And what I think the gift that this book gave is that no, you can run forever. You can just rip your toenails off and run forever. You can do it.
Well, yeah, 2 points. One is you don't have to lose your toenails. Like to me, I feel like that is like my window into like my other pet peeve, other than the be hard,
Yeah.
which again destroys your longevity.
Mm.
And secondly, it's the reason why your feet are so bad is because your shoes don't fit.
Because of
You
shoes.
know,
Yeah. I
shoes
know.
don't fit. They're way too friggin' narrow and they're way
Yeah.
too elevated. The reason why your toenails hurt is because your feet are on a slant. They're on a downward slant. The heel
So
is
they're like,
higher than yeah. They're
yeah.
sliding forward into a narrow toe box.
Hmm.
If you look at the Dalmatian, they don't have busted up toenails.
I
They
know.
run an open toed. Look at Barefoot Ted. His feet are immaculate.
Right.
So, I mean that is a downside. That is a consequence of a product. Period. So
Mm.
you don't have to suffer that. But I know that was not the point you were getting at. But
No, I appreciate it though.
what's kind of funny is when you said that, I didn't realize. Well, dude, actually, come to think about it, I'm 62. Like I am now entering the realm that I was writing about,
Yeah.
and I definitely feel that it's anecdotally true. Um, when Eric Orton began to coach me back in 2004 or 5, 20 years ago,
Uh-huh.
he said, if you learn the craft of running, you can run as far as you want, whenever you want, anytime you want for the rest of your life. You can go
Mm.
faster and farther forever. 20 years ago, I'm like, yeah, when I wasn't running at all, when I was 50 pounds heavier, I'm like, yeah, dude, whatever. I'm just trying to do one race. But now I look back and go, that was actually the gift he gave me was
Mm-hmm.
greater than I expected, because at the time I thought, oh, the big win is being able to do this race. No, the big win is being able to keep doing races and running 20 years
Yes.
later.
Yeah. I mean, so this is my problem with racing. Like my bigger picture is that, I've DNF'd a lot of 100-milers, but I'm always at this tension of, hey, if I DNF, I live to run another day. If I keep going, maybe I finish, but I do something irreparable. And so I've always erred on this side of live to run another day, because at 41, I'm feeling better than ever. This sport has given me such a gift of making me feel like not only I could live longer, but I could be happier living longer as a runner. Um, I'm always erring on that side of live to run another day. And I think that's the greater gift of Born to Run, that you at 62, I'd love to know what running is like for you today, but you at 62, you still run with joy.
Totally. Hey, so I haven't watched the Hal Kerner episode. What did Hal
Yeah.
Kerner say? Well, first of all, our friend Zach Friedley, who's an adaptive athlete,
Uh-huh.
runs with a blade instead of a leg. He said DNF is better than a DNS. Did not finish is
Absolutely.
better than it did not start.
I
But
like
what
that.
did Hal say? What was his word of wisdom for you about finishing
It was
100?
a similar conversation to you where I was just like, man, how, I'm in Salt Lake City, and he won the first 5 years of the Bear 100. He existed before the '02 boom, the 9/11 boom, I guess as you mentioned in the book. He was late 90s. So, I was curious how he got into the sport. In the late 90s, he said he was running in jean shorts, which I just absolutely love. There was none of this optimized gear. So he had like a fanny pack that he found somewhere that he converted. So imagine a guy maybe in jean shorts with a fanny pack and converting all this road stuff over. And when I was talking to him about just how does he keep going, part of it is that he's competitive. And so if you can smell the podium, that keeps you going. But what I could bring into my audience and to me personally was that sometimes it's just, I put so much work into this. It's almost like a sunk cost analysis. My friend Jeremy talks about it like as this sunk cost analysis. I've put so much into this. If I don't keep going, I'm going to have to put all of that into this again and the finish. In the words of my friend Jeremy, today I just have the finish. And so that's what Hal was talking about. Like I've given so much, my last 9 months of my life have been to make this thing happen. And that's what he said when he couldn't, when the podium wasn't a possibility, what kept him going still was, the love of the community and wanting to see the fruition of his work.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mean, Hal's an interesting guy.
Yeah.
He is such a half beast. You know,
Yeah.
like I've been up to Bend at his store and run with him and his buddies,
Hmm.
and it is such joyfulness. You know, it's such
Yes.
mischief. It's so prankish that
Yes.
even though he talks about nobler pursuits, I just think he's having fun, man. I don't know. And maybe it's
Yeah.
that wacky grin he's got on his face all the time. You know, it's
Yeah.
like resting Kerner face is just
Yeah.
like, you know, like a sarcastic smile. So I don't really understand about it. My suspicion is the more uncomfortable it gets, the more fun he's having. He talks about putting
Yeah.
his. Do
Yeah.
you hear about the thing about him putting his balls into a sandwich bag?
No.
Yeah, he got so badly chafed that at an aid station, he ate like a PBJ, and they took the sandwich bag and put it around his nuts, and used that as a way because his scrotum was getting so badly chafed. He had to put. And I've never heard it before or since. I don't even know if it worked, but I
Yeah,
almost
I
got
love
feeling
that.
he's
Maybe I'll
like,
do a
yeah,
follow
why
up.
not? Yeah, I want to put my balls in the bag, see what happens, you know.
Well, I
So,
think like the pre 2012 runner, there was no money to be made in the sport. So the best of the best were running pure. I mean, love. It couldn't have been anything other than love because they had day jobs and they
right.
were trying to get first place at the Bear 100 or Western. So what's happened really since Born to Run, and of course, Born to Run has played a role in it, but more money is coming into the sport. And so we've some people who would normally be road runners chose to be trail runners instead. We're getting really fast time, like the absurd, 14 hours and like 5-minute course record at Western States when Scott was winning it at like 17 and a half hours. The sport has progressed significantly. And I'm not saying like Jim Walmsley's not having fun, but maybe he is and maybe he's not. But Hal was so clearly a happy runner. And so is
Right,
Zach Miller today, another fellow Pennsylvanian. I mean,
right.
he's clearly a happy runner. But that generation of Hal and Jen and Anton Kaprichka, Scott, they were happy runners.
Um, it's almost like it's unfair to throw Zach into the mix because he is a unique creature.
Yeah, he would have
We're
done
actually from
well in Hal's era.
for sure, for sure. I can see them being best buds. He's actually from
Yeah.
my area. He's from Conestoga, which is right near Lancaster,
Oh, are
and
you
we've
from
actually,
Lancaster?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, I have a really
Well, I'm
good
originally
buddy
from
from Lancaster.
Oh, I'm originally from Philly, but where we lived, Peach Bottom, was 20 miles south of Lancaster. So that was the nearest
Oh,
town to our farm.
nice.
Yeah. Who's your
Yep.
buddy from Lancaster?
Luke Bingaman. Shout out to Luke Bingaman. Yeah, he used to live here in Salt Lake City, and then he grew up in Lancaster, went to high school. He was a runner there in high school. He's the same age as Zach Miller, but moved out here and then moved back to Lancaster.
So, Zach is beloved in that area because, do
Yeah.
you know about him bringing a crew of Amish runners to France to crew for him?
No, I had no idea.
So it was, I believe, his second Ultra Trail du Mont Blanc,
Uh huh.
which is 130 miles through the Alps, starting in like France, going through Switzerland and Italy,
Yeah.
back into France. And the first year he went, I'm a little foggy on the timeline, but so he
Hmm.
came out of nowhere. You know his whole story. He comes off of a cruise ship where he'd been
Yeah.
working
Yeah. Yeah.
and jumps into the JFK 50 and wins it. Probably would have had the course record, except he was fighting the headwind the whole way.
Right.
People are like,
Right.
who's this guy?
Yeah.
And that same year, soon after, there's a local 10-mile trail run, the Conestoga 10 miler. And he showed up. So here he is. Suddenly he's a national sort of trail running celebrity, big in that small pond. But he still goes
Hmm.
back to his hometown race, runs it, crushes it, and is at the finish line greeting everybody for hours.
Yeah.
Hey, where'd he go? Where'd he go? Where'd he go?
Yeah.
That kind of guy. Um,
Yeah.
so his first, I believe it was his first. He almost won. He's like up Killian Jornet's ass the whole
Yes.
time. And
Yes.
because, he's going for the win and he sort of ends up dropping back at the end. The next year, he shows up with all of his buddies from Lancaster who are Amish runners, most of whom have never driven
Oh my
a
goodness.
machine vehicle in their lives other than a tractor.
Yeah.
And so those are his crew, but like he really liked those guys, like to run with them, and they are the ultimate hardworking non-complainers. But at one
Oh,
point,
smart.
they had to go from one aid station to the other. So a bunch of guys were running with Zach, and the guy, Jonathan, Jonathan Landis, they left the keys with him. He didn't know how to drive, and it's a stick shift. So he puts it in first gear, and there's just like grinds the gears up through the Alps to the
He
next
just
aid
goes
station
first gear all the way.
all the way. So that is Zach Miller,
Yeah.
a guy that is so competitive that he can
Yeah.
go up against absolute freaks of nature like Kilian
Yeah.
Jornet. At the same
Yes.
time, is such a hometown goofball that he brings his Amish buddies, a
Yeah.
non-mechanized culture to Europe.
it's that's I
The
can't
crew
believe. I
for him.
mean, I'm a big fan of Zach's. I can't believe I've never heard that story before. That's so good.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
so him.
yeah, yeah. But also, it's so him because he doesn't really tell him that much. Because to him, he's like, "Oh, of course I brought those guys. They're my buddies. So
Yeah.
why wouldn't I?"
Yeah. He's
Yeah,
not trying to make a statement. It's just like, yeah, these are the guys I'm bringing.
these are my boys. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a question that you asked in the book, and I can't remember if it was you as the writer who asked it or if it was someone else who said it. But you were talking about, and I might say his name wrong, Emil Zatopek.
Zatopek. Yeah, Emil Zatopek.
And the question was, is he a great man who happened to run, or did running make him a great man? I mean, I think about that all the time. And now I'm not saying that I'm a great man, but I am saying that I'm a better man than I would be without running. And the more that time goes by, I think, like what's possible with, like, fitness is the least valuable thing to me of running. So since 2009, however long it is now, is that 15 years? Do you think about that question ever? Do you have answers to that question? I mean, do you have interesting thoughts on that question?
Not exactly in those terms. I had forgotten it. What's funny about when you're working on a book, you'll spend 2 years inside your own head.
Right.
You're by yourself at a little table trying to put stuff together, and you're having a conversation with yourself. And by the
Mm-hmm.
time you're done, you've just been released from solitary confinement, and you don't want to ever go back into that cell again. So I've never actually reread Born to Run.
Wow.
I forget a lot of stuff that's in there.
Yeah.
So people will bring
I
stuff
believe it.
up people bring stuff up like my daughters and I were at an acai bowl place, and one of the
Mm-hmm.
things they offer as a topping is chia seeds.
Uh-huh.
And so I turned to my daughter and go, I invented chia seeds. Just to like an annoying dad flex, just to really annoy them.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
just to watch their eyeballs roll back in their
That's
heads.
exactly it. Yep.
But I'm like, oh yeah, actually, before Born to Run, you never heard about chia. Never. It was just not out there. So, but I kind of forgot about it. Like I forgot that. Oh yeah, there's that whole thing where I was down in the canyons and like, what are you guys drinking? Oh, it's this drink. What's that? Escate. What the hell is it? What are these like fish eggy things? Oh, those are chia seeds. Never. And I only knew about chia pets. So Emil Zatopek, I had almost forgotten that subplot's in there. And
yeah.
the only reason I knew about it was because I spoke to Coach Joe Vigil, and he mentioned how much he loved Emil Zatopek. And I was dimly aware of Zatopek as the only guy who'd won all 3 distance medals in the same Olympics. No one had ever done it before.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. Well, Coach Vigil, what is it you like about him? I assumed it was his running prowess. No, he was an honorable man.
Yeah.
And he told the story about Zatopek giving his gold medal to Ron Clark, a guy who had. And so I was intrigued by the whole story, but it has absolutely nothing to do with anything in Born to Run. There is no reason for that story and that man to be in this book. But I was intrigued by it, and I remember thinking, all right, I'm going to try to shove this in here.
Yeah.
And wait for someone to like throw up the red flag and say, dude, what's this?
Why is this here? Yeah.
Why is this here? I was waiting for my editor to say, get this out.
It's such a well told story that it didn't even occur to me to question it. It was just like, oh, what a great person. But I think where to me it fits in on the larger narrative of the book is, how running shapes people,
right,
and the gift that running can be to you, and it's almost always more than just the fitness that comes with it.
I think every culture has some mechanism for release, for letting things go. In yoga, it's meditation. In Australia, it's the walkabouts. The Aboriginal walkabout. Native Americans have the same thing. You go off into the wilderness and let things go. And I think that's what running is for me. So what's the chicken and egg? I'm not quite sure. Is that affect that way first, or did running help it? I have to imagine that running is the great release of our self-importance and our self-preoccupation that
Mm.
allows us to be our better selves. And I think
Mm.
that's why I resist when I keep hearing about these, like, be tough, be hard, be strong, be strong.
Mm.
That's the opposite, dude. Be soft, be relaxed, be pleasurable.
Mm.
You talk about Scott Jurek going down to the Copper Canyon. In this age of professionalism now, no fucking way is a top guy going down for some half-ass jabroni draw a line in the dirt race.
Yeah.
No way. But Scott was and remains that explorer, that wanderer.
Mm.
He is a bridge back to that culture of using physical activity, because you know what happens on a run. You don't want to do it. It's rainy, it's
Mm-hmm.
cold, you're tired, you're sore. You don't want to do it. You go out the door, your body protests. There's way more comfortable ways to spend the next hour than this.
Yep.
And so you're only focused on your own discomfort for the first 15, 20 minutes. And then your body loosens up, your breathing starts to deepen, you start to relax, and at that point your head comes up and you notice, oh, hey, it's actually, the rain's stopping. All right,
Yeah.
there's that trail.
Life is
I
good.
knew my running route in Pennsylvania. I knew it so well. I knew the exact tree in the woods where I would get that feeling. Like, I don't
Hmm.
want to do it. And
Hmm.
I tell myself that's by the time you get to that tree, you'll be happy you're here. So,
Hmm.
and so I think that's it to me, is that what running gives people, why
Yeah.
it improves us as people, is because it gives us a sense of, like,
Hmm.
I think I have a line of Born to Runs, like, maybe not, but I can't tell you how many times I've come back from a run with feeling the need to apologize. Like, you go out the door self-righteous and you come back apologetic.
Mm. Yeah, there's something that happens during the run that does strip away some ego. That'll, maybe it's just this some macho piece to me, but it's like the run takes away some piece of ego. I do return softer to my kids, to my wife, and I don't know if that's the good chemicals firing. That's just like making me love life more, or what it is. But you're exactly right. And to think about what you're saying related to Goggins is what he might be advocating for is a facade of strength. What you're advocating for is the removal of the facade and just being who you are. Running allows you to just let all that go.
Yeah, generosity of spirit, because you see it a lot in your 100 milers. You see it a lot. You will never be more grateful to a person in your life than that person at the aid station who hands you an M&M. Like,
Oh my goodness.
right?
Yeah.
Fantastic. You just feel such love.
Yeah.
And people who volunteer at aid stations, I think they do it because you will never see more adoration in someone's eyes,
Yeah.
than the person coming into the aid station and you hand them a cup of hot beef broth. Like, oh my God,
Totally.
thank you. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I think, and I mean, it also, to me, it really gets back to that ancestral origins of why I called the book Born to Run. This
Hmm.
is our evolutionary inheritance. Um,
Mm.
running is our physical superpower. It's what
Mm.
allowed us to survive and spread across the planet. And so, Barefoot Ted talked about, like letting a fish slip back into the water. You have a
Mm.
fish in your hands and it slips back into the water and it just wiggles away. The
Mm.
second it touches the water, it's back in its atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's what it is with running. That evolutionary, we're hardwired in a lot
Yeah.
of ways to find contentment and spiritual strength from
Mm.
this.
Evolutionary inheritance is such a beautiful notion. Are you still in touch with David Carrier?
No, no, and for no particular reason other than, you know, after Born to Run came out, to me, this was just my most recent assignment. Then moving
Yeah.
on. So
Yeah.
I come
Yeah.
out and writing hard news and magazines, like, and once it's published, moving on to the next thing. So I went right on to Natural Born Heroes, running with Sherman. So
Mm.
it took me a while to realize, oh, actually, this is more than one book.
Yeah.
This is a lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, I think about Born to Run in the same way. One of my favorite bands is Death Cab for Cutie, and they're touring on like the 20th anniversary of an album called Transatlanticism. And they've put out a number of great albums since then, but Transatlanticism was so good. I mean, I just feel like you'll be on those tours, in the same way that Death Cab is. You know what I mean? Like there's a 15th anniversary, a 20th anniversary. Like it's just like it was just such a gift to the fans. To put it in musical terms, that it's worthy of chatting about often.
Yeah, well, that's why we decided to do a follow-up book. That's why we went with Born
Yes.
to Run too, because I had deliberately refused to answer any questions about what shoes to buy, how to train,
Yeah.
how to change your running form, because I kept saying, I'm not that guy. I'm not a
Yeah.
coach. I
Yeah.
write about those guys. I'm not those guys. But two things dawned on me. One was I've become like living evidence that what guys like Coach Eric Gordon say, I'm like the zoo animal that's still alive. Like it worked, like what you said was going to happen, it happened. Here I am. So I am I'm the panda that was able to reproduce in captivity. It worked. Look what you did. Um,
Yeah.
and the second thing was also that there's also nothing wrong with being a translator, because
Mm.
Eric and I have actually done a lot of events together. He would come on book tour with me,
Yeah.
and what I would see is that he has so much buzzing around inside his brain, it doesn't always translate into speech. And so
Mm. Hmm.
we became actually a pretty good team of
Yeah.
me, like what Eric wants to say is this. If Eric gets people outside and has them move, perfect. But if he's
Mm.
standing in front of a group, he'll just start dialing back through his archives of information. And after a while, you feel like you're being lectured by like a Yale professor. So that's why I thought, let's do this. Let's take what Eric knows and put it into a format that speaks to the attention deficient like me. Like,
Mm.
here's an example. So we're doing exercises for training biomechanics for Born to Run 2. So I said, all right, send me over the exercises. And he sends me 30 exercises. I'm like, dude, on what planet do you think I'm going to do 30 exercises? Never, never. You better give me 3, and I better be able to do them in my kitchen while I'm making coffee, or forget it.
Yeah.
And so that was it. He had to condense what he knew into a format where I became his first guinea pig. Like, if I'm not going to do it, we're not going to tell anybody else.
But then again, if you do it, then anybody can do it, or everybody can do it.
Right.
Something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
So, one of his things is, balancing on one foot. I actually forgotten that he was the one who first told me to do that, because I've been doing it now for so many years
Mm-hmm.
that I don't even think about it. Like if I'm in line at the post office, I'll just start to balance on one foot, and I'll be wobbling around, I'll bounce on the other foot. It's just my way of killing time,
Interesting.
And then as we're working on this book, Eric's like, "Oh yeah, the balance on the foot." But, oh, I forgot that was from you. That's 20 years ago. You told me to do that. Yeah, and I do it all the time. It's great for not just foot strength and awareness, but
Yeah.
for full balance. Full balance and
Mm.
posture. You can't stand up straight if your body is bent over. The straighter you are, the more
Mm.
core stable you are, the easier it is to balance on one foot.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're running, if you're propelling yourself forward from that core,
Yeah.
if you're thinking about pushing yourself hips first and
Mm-hmm.
having that leg whip around, like that's a key to a really efficient, effortless running.
Hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. So you're saying like with the standing on one foot thing, it's just you're not doing anything other than just lifting up one foot. You're not flexing. It's just like you're just standing there, just that balance. That's it, and that gives you some
It,
core. That you're building core, you're building balance, all of that.
correct, but it's self-teaching, because if I tell you,
Mm-hmm.
hey, take your shoes off, balance on one foot with your heel off the ground. So you balance
Mm-hmm.
on the ball of one foot. The other foot's in the air, and the heel of the support foot is in the air. And that's it. That's all the instructions I need to give you. And then
Hmm.
bit by bit, you will teach yourself the rest of it. You know,
Mm.
you'll really, oh, hey, wait a minute, if I put my shoulders back, this works. Oh, if I do this, it works. You
Yeah.
don't need a list of 15 instructions. You just like balance on one foot with your
Hmm.
heel up. And then all
Hmm.
the rest of it falls into place because you realize that the changes you make it easier.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about what you said in Born to Run 1, where you're just talking about, uh, what was that? Yeah. We were talking about pronation. Like pronation is only a thing because of shoes.
Yeah,
So you can't fix the problem with the thing that's causing the problem. You're only going to continue to exacerbate the problem.
yeah, yeah. I mean, this whole overpronation thing, it comes from the whole heel toe thing. But I mean, everybody pronates. If you're running barefoot, again, it's a thing where it's funny. I was on a radio show once after Born to Run first came out. It was like in like Duluth or something, and it was like a
Hmm.
local call-in program. And some guy calls in, and he's got a million questions about. But if I run barefoot, like, should I do this or should I do that or how? I said, dude, where are you now? I'm at home. Just take your shoes off, run around the block, and call back. And he's like, okay. And he hangs the phone. He takes some other calls. We're talking, and then the producer's like, Bill's back online too. Bill, how was your run? He's like, it was amazing. But all the
That's so good.
questions he had, he just took his shoes off, ran around the block, and then his body taught him. His body gave him the answers.
Yeah.
And the answer was, well, how should I land and what should I do? Dude, your foot will tell you what's
Yeah.
comfortable. If it's uncomfortable, your foot will say, let's not do that anymore. Let's do this.
Yeah.
So, if you run barefoot, the first couple times you land on your heel, like, that doesn't feel good. Let me try my forefoot. Oh, that feels better. Let me
Mm.
try the outside near my pinky toe. Oh, that
Hmm.
feels way better. So
Hmm.
within five
Yeah.
strides, your foot has corrected all your problems.
Yeah. And I love the bit of research that you noted that padding in shoes has no change in impact. Like, your whatever the equation is, it's like your body weight times X with or without cushion, it's the same. So that cushion, it's a lie that cushion is in some way helping you.
Yeah, I'm 200 pounds of meat. The sidewalk is 100% of hardness.
Yeah.
200 pounds meaning absolute resistance. And putting that much foam between it, what's that going to do? Nothing.
Right.
It's like an oven mitt.
Right.
I'm hitting it no matter what. So
Yeah.
it deadens the sensation, but does not change the impact.
That's fascinating. Well, one last question for you here. I know you've got a day ahead of you, and um, I I'm just curious. Like, to open this, I talked about the books that were meaningful to me, and really, it's those authors to me because those, with the exception of Shackleton. I don't remember who wrote Shackleton's Incredible Voyage, but those authors to me were what I began to love even beyond the books. And I just wonder, like, pre-Born to Run, you were still magazine writer, having success there, but what were the authors for you at that time that you were like, oh man, if I could talk to this author for an hour, wouldn't that just be the coolest thing?
It's funny because there are books like that. And like one of them in particular, this is kind of a weird one. It's called Dust of the Saints by a
Okay.
guy named Radek Sikorsky. And at
Okay.
the time, he was a Polish journalist who went to cover the war in Afghanistan because he was so outraged by Soviet domination of his country. This is before the collapse of the Soviet Empire. And
Hmm.
so he went to Afghanistan not because he was in favor of the Taliban. He was in favor of anybody who's going to shove it up the butt of the Soviets.
Yeah.
And I was living as an expat in Madrid at the time, and
Okay.
someone had this book. This is back in the day where books would change hands. There was no Amazon. Um, there weren't even that many Barnes and Nobles and Borders. There weren't that many bookstores, right? You had your small indie bookstore. So
Yeah.
books would go from hand to hand. So someone had Dust of the Saints. I read it, and I remember thinking, this is what writing's all about.
Hmm.
It's about going off somewhere to figure out what's going on. This dude was way out of his element,
Hmm.
but he was there for a reason. He's like, I want to try and understand what
Yeah.
we can do in Poland.
Hmm.
to resist this autocracy
Wow.
that's taken us over. So, dust to the
Hmm.
saints. And since then, this is actually subsequent to Born to Run, but I like to bring it up because when Born to Run came out, we were doing this barefoot run from Harlem to Brooklyn. It was like it's a big
Hmm.
wacky event, and there were like 200 or 300 people, and we're all like running like a mob through the streets of New York. And I met this woman named Susanna Cahalan. She came up to me, hey, listen, I'm working on a book. If you have time, can you answer some questions? Yeah, sure do. There's like 200 people here, but here's my email. Send me some questions. So she sent me a couple
Hmm.
questions. I probably gave her just quickest answers, like, yeah, do this, do that. And then her book came out, and she sent me a copy. And I didn't read it. I put it aside. And then way later, I finally got around to reading it. I was like, oh my god,
Hmm.
this woman deserves so much more of my attention because this book's
Wow.
unbelievable. It's called Brain on Fire by
Okay.
Susanna Cahalan. And
Okay.
it's a true story about her own sort of lapse into insanity because of a brain virus. And
Whoa.
I read that book, and then I reached out to her and said, dude, I owe you so much more respect and attention. She said, no, you were great. I said, no, man, what you went through and what you did with it is unbelievable. And so if anybody has a chance to read Brain on Fire,
Okay. I'll check that
um,
out.
Hale, it's an amazing piece of work. And she's like a cool, like vibrant personality, great person.
Yeah.
Oh, we got
Yeah.
one more for you
Amazing.
too. Another
Yeah.
one. Crazy is My Superpower by AJ Mendez, former
Okay.
professional wrestler. Someone who's not a writer, but to me, like, was able to tell a story
Hmm.
unique to her in a way that was utterly like transfixing.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Well, Chris, I just am, I don't even know how to put words to it. I'm just thankful for you and for what you've done and the contribution that you've made and to this sport. It's why I'm here, and it's why majority of the people are here. People who are running before the book came out. It definitely put fuel on the fire. Um, so thank you for taking this time to talk to me today, and I really look forward to doing it again soon.
yeah, man. Anytime. This was fun. I would totally pick
Okay.
this up, again in the future.
Right on. Well, hey, as soon as I hang up here, if you'll hold on for like 5 seconds, I just got to wrap up some things. But thanks again, man.
Yeah, Josh. Thanks, bud.